Jamie, let's talk about your background a moment. Now, do you get upset if people say to you, you're a financial service executive, you live in New York, and they think you're Jewish, but you're not Jewish, right?
I'm Greek, and where's Ted? I saw Ted somewhere over here, but I'm proud to be Greek. And when, I got a letter when I became chairman and CEO of J.P. Morgan. It said J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Dimon, only in America, and that's true, by the way. So you wouldn't have a Greek second generation Greek American running a company like J.P. Morgan Chase, and but I did marry a good Jewish girl from Bethesda.
So you started out. Your father was a stockbroker, and you started out with some background in this area, but did you ever consider going into banking? Was that always what you wanted to do when you went to Harvard Business School?
No, I knew more what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be a lawyer, and I didn't want to be a doctor, and I want to be part of building something. And obviously I grew up around stockbrokers and Wall Street and stuff like that. My dad, who passed away recently, gave me, you should all try this one day, get an annual report, rip out the part that has the price in it, analyze it, and say what you pay for the stock, and you'll be immediately humbled. Immediately. Do it a couple of times. And so I was always in the financial world, but to me, just building something, and so I went to business school and stuff. I didn't have to go to the financial world, but I just was fascinated. Everything you read in the paper matters. They're global. You get involved in so many policy issues. So it was just a fun place to build, but I would have had just as much fun building something else.
But normally, if somebody's a Baker Scholar at Harvard Business School, they can pick almost any job they want. You could have gone to Goldman Sachs, which is a great firm. You chose to go work for Sandy Weil. Why did you do that?
Sandy, he had a small brokers firm that he sold to American Express at the time. And I found he was kind of down to earth. He had offered me to go to Shearson, their investment bank. I said no, because I had offers from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Lehman. I said, I'd learn a lot more at these other places than at Shearson. They eventually called me up, kind of liked me. I was a Baker Scholar, which was important to him. And I said, why don't you just come here and be my assistant? You'll learn a lot. I don't know what's going to happen. And so American Express, he lasted there about 3 more years. But you did learn a lot.
So when he left, he was
when he left, I left with him. I was offered a bunch of jobs to stay and stuff like that. But he said, we're going to find something, build something great. And he was hoping, we tried to take over Bank of America, you may vaguely remember that. Right. And he also thought he might be offered the CEO role at Merrill Lynch, but none of these things came his way. And so we took over this little company called Commercial Credit up in Baltimore here. One of my babies was born in Sinai Hospital, and I moved down here, and we took this little company. It had a consumer finance thing like 7 other little companies, including like a leasing company in Israel, a small international bank that made loans which all went bankrupt called Less Developed Country Loans, a property casualty company, a small life insurance company, and that company is the same company that became Citi. And over those 12 years, we bought, so these names you'll recognize, Primerica, Smith Barney, Shearson, Solomon Brothers, Aetna Property Casualty, Travis Life, Travis Property Casualty, and it was a conglomerate. We did a good job running them, we did a good job for shareholders, and merged it with Citi. And so it was a hell of a run, and then he fired me. And
so what?
When he did that, a year later, I called him up and said, I called him. He didn't call me, just so you know. I said, Sandy, it's time to break bread. And we met at the Four Seasons restaurant, and I wanted to do it privately. He said, no, we'll meet at the Four Seasons restaurant. It was on the front page of the FT, Dimon, Weil have lunch, with Civil War in Chechnya. I'm thinking, this is like, anyway, he was a little nervous, and I said, say, we're not going to spend any time in the past. All I want to say is you did the wrong thing for the company. I made a lot of mistakes too. And here's some of the mistakes I made. After I gave him the mistakes I made, he said, thank you for sharing that with me. We had a very nice lunch. It's now quite clear he did the wrong thing for the company. And life goes on.
So you were in a small office, I recall, at the Seagram's building. You rented a small office there.
After I got fired, you mean?
Right, after you were fired, you had a small office there. I came to see you.
I was fired. I mean, this shows you how stupid corporate America gets when you have, the company had been set up that we had co-chairman and co-CEO, John Reed and Sandy Weil. I was going to be the president and run the global corporate investment bank and other jobs. Because of turmoil among management, deals are very tough. We had tri-heads of the global corporate bank, co-heads of asset management, co-heads of consumer, and all the staff units, risk, finance, and technology are going to report to me. Instead, all the staff units reported jointly to Sandy and John. When they did that, I said to them, you guys are crazy. This will destroy the company. The second you do this, people are going to be building trenches and stockpiling ammunition. And by the time you two guys figure it out, a lot of good people have left the company, not realizing I'd be the first casualty, by the way. But they were so, and they kept on saying, well, it works for me, it works for me. And I kept on saying, it doesn't matter if it works for you. It matters if it works for the clients and the employees. It works for me. And so when you hear CEOs say it works for me, you should question their intelligence a little bit about, because it's not the way you should look at business. It's what works for the client, ultimately.
Well,
So I'm going to play with this idea that you say you're not an entrepreneur, and I'm going to suggest there's at least two ways to think about what it means to be an entrepreneur. One is have an entrepreneurial mindset, which is the mindset to make the type of job choice you made.
Yeah.
Another is using entrepreneurial methodologies. So take one such example, lean startup, where you try to experiment, iterate, and move quickly to solve problems. So do those two definitions apply to you at all? And if whether or not, how do you define the word entrepreneur?
Yeah, so I think it's really hard to define personally. But look, if you're a big company, you need most of those things too, which is, when I was with Brad in the bus ride, just coming over, if you don't have good team members you're working with, if you have bureaucracy, politics, bullshit, and all that kind of stuff taking place, you're going to fail. If you're a big company, sometimes you have to put your new business ideas in the mainstream. Like, I'll give you an example. We can't do digital banking and separate that from consumer banking. It's got to be involved in that. However, if you have an idea, a different kind of idea, and you put it in the mainstream, it will get killed. So you have to set up separately. You plant it separately, you feed it separately, you support it separately. And Gordon Smith was in front of me, and Jen Peepsack was doing, who actually came up with all this stuff on some of the startup weeks and et cetera. You got to applaud people doing that. So we've invented whole new businesses in the last 10 or 15 years. Again, I wasn't the person who did it, but I am very conscious about seeding it with money, people, talent, time, and more importantly, letting them fail. We have this thing called the private client branches. There's 2,500 now. It failed over and over and over before we got the formula right. And then, I don't know if Barry Summers is still here, but then we got the great management team, and they took it from 1 to 2,500 as one of the fastest growing parts of our company today.
So there are a few points in there worth teasing out. First off, have you read the book, The Innovators Dilemma?
Yes.
Because your prescription is exactly from that book, which is you take something which can cannibalize your current business, you have to create a protective shield or separated unit.
Right.
I take it, is that part of your management philosophy?
Yeah, like I said, you have to do it. You have to really look at the issue, because sometimes you will fail if you do that, and sometimes if you don't do that, it will fail. We have no problem disrupting ourselves, so we don't have business meetings and say, you can't do that, it'll hurt our basic business. So if any one of our business leaders says, we're going to invent this new product that's going to kill our other business, our first that'd be fine. Go for it. Because, if not you, somebody else. And so that is the history of innovation and technology, and it's been that way, since mankind started to farm. People find and invent new ways to do things in business. If you look at big businesses, going back to I think the biggest business in 1900 in the United States was the Buggy Whip company and an ice company that kept ice in caves and delivered it to people because they didn't have refrigeration. So you damn well better be thinking how you can do things better, faster, quicker, for the consumer, by the way, not for us, if you want to survive.
So another point you mentioned on private banking is not being afraid to let an emerging business fail, retweak it.
Right.
In Innovators Dilemma, Clayton Christensen talks about where Apple, they invented one of the first personal digital assistants and called it the Newton.
Right.
And it just didn't succeed well enough, and as a bigger company, they couldn't stay with it. How do you handle that challenge, giving an emerging business room to grow in the context of a large company?
Yeah, well, like I said, this private client thing, we actually set up, it was inside the branch system, we set up separately. We reported to very senior people who made those decisions, so you didn't have local managers saying, I'm not going to give them my real estate. I'm not going to give them the technology. Why do they have to get their own entrance? Why do they have to get their own conference room? We protected it that way to that extent, and like I said, you have to do it. Banks are huge users of technology. I met with Bill Gates in 1994, and he said, banks are going to be dinosaurs and all that. We had more programmers that comes out, which is Travelers Group and Citigroup, than Microsoft did. And today, we've got 15,000 systems engineers. And it all been outsourced. We took it almost all back in. I believe in doing a lot of things yourself, by the way. And so banks are huge users of technology. If you look at technology, you wouldn't have mutual funds without computers. the cost of selling trades and doing things has dropped dramatically over time, and now most of you do your banking online, you get alerts online. We've got a very highly rated online banking thing, which is changing our business. People are going to branches less, they're using ATMs more, they're doing a whole bunch of different things, but even those ATMs are partially invented by us to provide services to clients out there. But the other important part about the people side, you often hear in big business, if someone fails, you have to fire them, particularly in a bank. They failed, they got to be fired. We don't do that. If you're a good person, you worked hard, you tried, you did it right, we don't think you're a bad person because you failed. And in America, until recently, failure was completely accepted. Now it's changing a little bit now. Now we excoriate people who failed, like they have no chance to come back and redeem themselves. But in a lot of other parts of the world, failure is not accepted. So I think that is an important part. And very often the people who failed are really much wiser for it. They won't make those mistakes the second time,
so
globally.
You've been now running a bank for CEO, Bank One, and JP Morgan for about 16 years. So what's the greatest pleasure of doing this, running a bank?
I get, maybe two things, okay? I get to travel around the world. I've been in, 60 countries for us, meet presidents and prime ministers and great companies and clients, and we bank countries, we bank their sovereign wealth funds, we bank their big things, and I think we do great stuff for them. We help them grow, we help them expand, we educate them about what they can do to grow their economies. We do it city by city. We do a huge amount of philanthropic work, or where it's not money, but it's our brain power. Peter Shear runs Greater Washington, is doing some of the stuff here, which some of you may know about. And I'm proud of that. We're making it a better world. Yes, of course, like most people, we make some mistakes, and sometimes they're doozies. The second is I'm just so damn proud of our people. I think JP Morgan Chase is chock full of just fabulous people who give a damn about their clients, their communities. It's not all about profit and stuff like that. And it just makes me, proud. So when I leave here, I'm just going to be so damn proud of what the people here did. And that's it. What else did you do? This is my way, this is my contribution to making it a better world, is running a good JP Morgan Chase. I tell people, if I don't do a good job at JP Morgan Chase, I hurt the opportunities for our people, I hurt the opportunities for the 2,000 hamlets we do business in, we can't be philanthropic, we can't help people grow, and if I do a good job, we can do all those things. I'm not an artist, I'm not a tennis player, I'm not a musician, I'm not a politician, this is my contribution.
Okay. One of your contributions has been in Detroit and other urban areas. You started a program to kind of revitalize some of these areas. Was that important to you personally?
Yeah, so Detroit is a special example, okay? Most American cities had a renaissance, almost all of them, including some that were in terrible shape, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Cleveland, but not Detroit. Population 2,000 to 700,000. If you've been there, blight, 70,000 abandoned homes. Whereas I think the next largest city was like Chicago with 5,000 abandoned homes. Abandoned homes, what we saw, and we're the biggest bank there. Let's keep that in mind. And we got to do that job well. Biggest consumer, middle market, we bank all the major companies there. We bank them globally. So we bank, GM and Ford, we bank them in 50 countries. We don't bank them just in the United States of America. But we saw a Republican governor and a Democratic mayor say things like, we want to turn around the city. We need jobs, we need the lights on, we need police, we need sanitation, we need businesses, we need affordable housing. And we saw that and we said, we're in full. Because they're talking about what people actually need, not this Democratic, Republican bullshit. So that, and they were doing it together. So Peter, Peter did all this work, not me. I asked Peter when I saw this, part of it came out of me talking to Eric Holder on one of these settlements. And I said, we could be using this money wisely, like in Detroit. And his ears perked up and said, yeah, you should be doing more in Detroit. I said, well, if you take less from me, there'll be more for Detroit. Peter sent a team of 50 people up. We didn't go up just throwing money at it. We met with the mayor, civic groups, the governor. We wouldn't have done it if they weren't collaborating. We said, what do you need to accelerate the process? So we helped them identify with a phone, geolocate all 70,000 abandoned homes. There's $1 million piece of software. We did it with a local firm. Now we're helping them get rid of the homes, have development plans for some of the area. We have a black entrepreneur fund. I've been to a couple of housing where they built affordable housing. We're building an M1 infrastructure, which is really needed between downtown and midtown, between Wayne State University and the city, which that tends to create a whole life. And they're turning. They're actually turning. Not just us, but there's There are tons of people doing it, but it is an example. So I do have a competitor, Citi, who always advertises. I say they spend more money advertising than they did in Detroit. You know, we put $100 million up there, and we don't advertise, and we're doing our share, and it's been a great thing. Peter is the chairman of Greater DC, so looking at Maryland, Baltimore, Virginia, DC, and it's a lot of the same issues. What can you do to do better? How can you collaborate across things with infrastructure needs, schools, make the best of the schools? And so these things actually work, people working together. And hopefully it'll be an example of people collaborating and making it a better society for everybody.
So I want to pick up this theme because it's definitely a core one in entrepreneurship. In other countries, so take Japan for an example, it literally is a shame or a black mark that sticks with you. Where here, entrepreneurs are allowed to try something, fail, and often it gets viewed as actually a badge of honor. Hey, this person wasn't afraid to try something. Right. How is that overall culture that we have benefit from here a critical advantage for this country? Say a little more about that.
It is. People don't fully, I don't think Americans fully understand and appreciate the culture that America has that other parts of the world don't. So when you are educated, you're educated to voice your opinion, to disagree with the teacher, to write an alternative history. You go to large parts of the world and it's all rote. You go to most American people in American business, and you know, we do it with our tellers on these bus trips, you know, we ask them, what can you do better? And they come up with a million ways sometimes how we can open accounts faster, why do we do this bureaucratic thing? They were a competitor, do something better. So we're actually taught to innovate. So it's not just the Steve Jobs, it's kind of productivity improvements on the factory floor, you know, drivers figuring out better routes and all these different type of things. So that's one. An unbelievable work ethic is a second. The ability to fail would be a third. And take Japan, by the way. You know, I get to travel around the world and see these things. Japan has unbelievable technology. They have some exceptional companies. And so you look at entrepreneurialism, their failure isn't that. They don't have, and they're kind of getting around to it now, they don't have great financial discipline. They weren't great at commercializing some of their products and services. But if you said pharma, turbines, optics, semiconductors, they've got some of the best in the world. And I can go on and on about their strengths. So part of their thing is to take those strengths and to do something with them that, you know, makes those companies far more successful. So the United States, and I should also point out, has, you know, people talk about countries, rule of law, widest, deepest, most transparent markets you'll ever see. And I'm not talking about banking markets, but venture capital, private equity, public markets, private markets, small banks, big banks, shadow banks. And it's a wonderful ecosystem that helps drive this, you know, America forward. You know, and both the entrepreneurialism that takes place in the startup, plus the, you know, you have big companies making big investments around the world. You know, multi-billion-dollar investments, which are entrepreneurial on their own. They're risky, and you know, sometimes those don't pay off either. So, you know, so this country's got a huge talent and strength that pushes it on.
So you've mentioned the system of finance and banking and how that relates to entrepreneurship. Talk a little more about the system of capital formation in this country and what the different parts of the system are and how they support entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so this, if you look at America, we have the widest, deepest, most transparent, best capital markets that have ever existed on the planet. I already mentioned the full mosaic of it, so I'm not talking about any particular one, but you know, capital in search of ideas, capital in search of people, capital in search of, you know, sometimes you just invest in the person. You just think they're great and you say, you know what, they're my person, I'm going to give them a big investment. And so all those things need to be fueled. So you talk about entrepreneurialism, okay? Part of what drives growth, and we all want growth in America, and I think growth in America will solve a lot of issues we got to deal with, including wage inequality and you know, better safety nets, and all the things this country does need, better infrastructure investing, a proper immigration policy. You know, part of it, if you look at the world, there are 17,000 companies, the top 17, that do half of all capital expenditures. Capital expenditures drive most of ultimate growth and productivity. So all the other, I'm going to say 28 million businesses, of which 20 million, like one-person shops, drive the rest. Those top 17, you know, when a big company builds that plant, you know, they might have 3,000 or 4,000 jobs in the plant. They might have spent $1 billion to $5 billion in that plant. There are usually 25,000 jobs around that plant. They can go from low tech, a barbershop, to high tech. There's huge consulting, marketing, data analytics that people, you know, private companies that help that plant or that company. So you talk about Boeing and Cargill, they've got 40, 50, 60,000 vendors. Those create huge entrepreneurial opportunities for people around the world. The most important thing, it's symbiotic, folks. It ain't one versus the other, it's both. And America, by the way, has a healthy big company sector, which has to compete globally in things like, aircraft, and we have to compete globally in things like global investment banking, and a huge middle market sector, and we have a huge small business sector. They're all vibrant. Again, if you go around the world, they don't all have that. They don't have that mix of things. Sometimes they're all big companies, and sometimes all the big companies have been destroyed. And you show me a country that has no successful big companies, I'll show you a country that's not successful. Okay, and if the TV wasn't on, I'd mention them here. But unfortunately, we do business in several of them, so